Okay, all right. So, Unit 3 populations. In this unit, we're going to be talking about all the different characteristics of populations, population growth. We'll be doing lots of calculations. And then we'll even talk about human populations and how human populations change. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in. The first section of this unit is called 3.1 Specialist and Generalist Species. And so there's two different types of population or of species that you should know about within a population. And those are, as I said, specialists and generalists. So specialists have a very small range of tolerance. We've talked about range of tolerance in the last unit. Or what that also means is that they have a very ecological niche, which makes them much more prone to extinction. So they have very specific food requirements and they have a very small ability to adapt to new conditions. So when I think of a specialist species, one of the first that I think of is something like a panda. And if you're familiar with panda, they tend to live in very specific areas of China in their natural environment. And that's the only place that we actually find them. And they only eat, their diet primarily consists of bamboo. And so they have to eat lots and lots of bamboo. And with habitat destruction, that's actually not a very good thing for the giant panda, and they aren't able to adapt to new environments very well. So a panda was what one of the most common examples of a specialist species. A generalist species is just on the opposite side of that spectrum. So they have a very large range of tolerance. They can handle a lot of different conditions. They have a very broad niche, which makes them a lot less prone to extinction. And these organisms are much more likely to be invasive species in an area because they can move into a new area and kind of like take over. They can eat a lot of different things. They can live in a lot of different areas. So one very common example I think of with that is a raccoon. Raccoons can live in the city, they can live in the country, they can live in highly, dense areas with lots of buildings. They can dig through trash cans to eat. They can feed on, natural things within the environment in a forest or fields, really wherever they live. So they can pretty much live everywhere. So raccoon, they have a broad food requirements and they are highly adaptable. Okay, so factors that we use to specify the difference between a generalist and a specialist species include four different things. So, niche and adaptability. And the questions you ask yourself are, which niche does this species occupy, and how easy would it be for them to adapt to a sudden change? Answering those questions can then help you figure out if it's a generalist species or a specialist. Same thing with diet. What do they eat? How readily is it available? So something like bamboo, if it was to be cut down in an area of a forest, would that mean that the animal can't live there any longer? Or would it be able to adapt and eat something else? And then also, how much would it impact them to forcibly change their intake of food? If you started feeding this organism something new right away, are they going to be able to tolerate that and survive? Location is another factor involved in this. And so you can ask yourself the question, where do they inhabit now? Does a change in their location or in their climate directly impact their survival? This is really important to note because of climate change. We're really able to see which organisms are more generalist species and which are more specialist based on how their habitats are changing. And so location is just another factor used to specify the differences between these types of organisms or to identify what type of organism you might have. And then lastly, and I'm going to hide my camera here, we have tolerance. Tolerance is how any small or large change would affect this organism or the population's well-being, and how quickly, if there is some sort of a disturbance, how quickly would they be able to recover in that situation. So again, those are the four factors that put all organisms onto this spectrum, because it really is a spectrum. Organisms can actually be here in the middle, or they can be highly specialist or highly generalist, or kind of there's some gray area in between. Like, do we consider them to be generalist? Do we consider them to be specialist? But in general, specialists have these characteristics: a narrow niche, less adaptable, they can become extinct quite easily, they use a specific set of resources, they're easily affected by changing conditions, and they do have an advantage when conditions are more constant. They have a very narrow niche, which means there's not a lot of competition for their for their resources. So that actually is an advantage to them if the conditions stay constant and there's no disturbances. Generalist species have a very broad niche. They're adaptable to many environments. They're less likely to become extinct. They can use a variety of resources, a high range of tolerance. Their advantage comes into play when those conditions change because they are highly adaptable. All right, so your practice RQ for generalist and specialist species is to identify one characteristic of a specialist species and explain how that characteristic makes them more likely to become extinct than a generalist species. Again, if you have any questions, make sure you're talking to me in class, and I'll see you all soon.